Hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. Recently, one of our fans, Michael Chocote, sorry if I butchered your name, sent us a question asking us to basically compare Mithril armor versus Bes'kar armor. Now this is an awesome question because it allows us to look at two of my favorite franchises, Star Wars and Harry Potter. Just kidding. Now, if you guys want your questions answered, send us a like and follow on our Generation Films Facebook page and send us a message with your video idea. Now, for those of you guys who follow us on Generation Tech, you are probably pretty familiar with what Bes'kar is. For everyone else, let's do a little refresher. Bes'kar, or Mandalorian iron, is one of the most durable metals in the Star Wars galaxy. It can only be found on the Mandalorian homeworld and its moon Concord Dawn. It was an extremely versatile metal that could be used for a variety of different applications that go beyond just armor plating. It was an extremely rare and valuable material, so much so that a pure Bes'kar armor suit could be worth more than a starship. This is also why Mandalorian armor is never discarded. And it's even harder to destroy. Not only is Bes'kar one of the most durable materials in the galaxy, it was also extremely heat resistant and had an extremely high melting point, which means that most standard blaster rounds and even lightsabers could hardly even heat up the surface of the material, let alone penetrate it. Which also means that a wearer of Bes'kar rarely outlasted the armor they were wearing, and so these valuable Bes'kar suits were usually passed down to other family or clan members. We could just end the video here, of course, because Bes'kar is clearly better than some magical silver worn by a bunch of knife-eared fairies. But let's have our resident half-elf magical armor expert, American Ben, talk about this dainty fashion armor.
Thank you, Alan, my regressive friend who hides his insecurities and lack of confidence in his own masculinity behind a suit of plate armor. Also, as I've told you millions of times, I'm not half-elf. I'm part elf and part a bunch of Eastern European / Russian things, so yeah, 100% elf, and the sunlight is currently melting me.
Hey, you get those vitamin D pills I sent you? I know it's really hard to get all the nutrients necessary for survival out of magical roots and mystical fountains.
Anyway, Mithril is neither magical or dainty. It might appear so to individuals with lesser intellect like trolls and wannabe Mandalorians, but at its core, it's an extremely valuable and rare metal, kind of like Bes'kar, only better. You see, the Mithril ore in its pure form was actually very soft and malleable. It could be combined with other materials to create a wide assortment of different metal alloys. It could be beaten and molded like copper or polished like glass. It could even be made into an extremely light alloy, even harder than tempered steel.
Well, you know, Ben, Mandalorian iron can also be molded into a bunch of different things, from plate armor, laminates, mesh, foam, micronized particles, even transparent film. I mean, in case you want like an indestructible iPhone with Bes'kar glass.
Why would you need foam or micronized particles? We're talking about which makes a better armor, correct? Mithril was an extremely beautiful and practical metal used for a wide variety of applications, from armor to jewelry. It was also rare, just like Bes'kar. By the end of the Third Age, Mithril could only be found in Khazad-dûm. Unfortunately, driven by greed, the Dwarven miners of Moria went too deep into the earth looking for the stuff and unleashed a Balrog which destroyed their entire civilization and also wiped out the last source of easily accessible Mithril.
Yeah, the same thing basically happened to Bes'kar. When the Empire took over Mandalore, they basically killed everyone and melted down their armor. It was a bad day.
So I guess you're saying that Bes'kar wasn't protective enough to save the Mandalorians?
No, I would say that Bes'kar is as protective as Mithril was for those dwarves when they encountered that gigantic demon monster from the underworld. High quality metals attract the wrong attention, you know that, Ben. But yeah, Bes'kar can turn away most conventional small arms, but it wasn't indestructible. High caliber blaster rounds could tear through the material or at least transfer enough concussive force to basically kill the person inside the suit. Bes'kar was not really great at absorbing shockwaves either, unfortunately. So grenades and explosives can do a lot of damage.
Mithril, like my head, is actually quite impressive when it comes to shock absorption. One of the most famous suits of Mithril armor in Lord of the Rings was a small shirt of mail that once belonged to the dragon Smaug. This armor was found by Thorin Oakenshield and his company. The Dwarven king gifted the Mithril to one of his companions, Bilbo Baggins. It would serve the Hobbit well, and just like with Mandalorian armor, this valuable piece of armor was handed down to his nephew Frodo Baggins. While on his quest to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring, Frodo and his company were ambushed in the mines of Moria. During one skirmish, a freaking gigantic troll hits Frodo's center mass with a giant sword. We're talking about like a 2-story tall hunk of demonic meat thrusting a pointed object into a tiny man-child with the force of a car crash. This was not a glancing blow. Oh no, 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 no. This was a stab in which the troll was able to get his full force behind the weapon. But miraculously, the mithril alloy actually held. The leather jerkin Frodo was wearing underneath was punctured by the force of the blow and caused some minor bruising. But that was all. I would argue that the kinetic force behind a spear thrust like that is even more powerful than a blaster bolt or even something heavier like an E-web cannon.
Well, what about the time on Weathertop when that Nazgul stabbed Frodo right in the shoulder?
Well, he didn't get the mithril until Bilbo met him at Rivendell.
Yeah, I feel like Bilbo dropped the ball there, man.
Well, you know, back in Bilbo's day, the road between the Shire and Rivendell was a lot safer.
Then what about that giant spider which stings Frodo through the mithril?
Well, in the book, Shelob actually stabs Frodo in the neck. And in the movie, although we see Frodo get stung center mass, it's very likely that Frodo wasn't wearing the mithril properly, and Shelob's sting misses the armor and connects with flesh. The thing is, you only need an extremely thin layer of mithril to stop even the strongest slashes. It can even absorb a good amount of kinetic energy, as we saw, something that, you admit, Bes'kar does not handle well.
Well, I'm sure Bes'kar can handle anything that mithril can, Ben. Mandalorians commonly go against knife and vibroblade wielding thugs, and they can hardly do any damage to pure Bes'kar. Din Djarin actually survived a similar thrust in the chest from a gigantic furry rhino, and he wasn't even wearing high-quality Bes'kar armor at the time and survived.
But in plate armor form, the standard Mandalorian armor is probably 10 times thicker than Frodo's mithril chain armor. I'm not even sure that mithril plate armor exists, and if it did, it would be prohibitively expensive. Gandalf was quoted once as saying that Frodo's mithril armor is more expensive than the entire Shire, but to be fair, nobody wants to live with hobbits.
That's not surprising when your village's main export product is little adorable walking snacks for dragons and orcs. I feel like we also need to acknowledge the fact that Mandalorian armor is just designed for different threats than what mithril is designed for. Bes'kar's primary attribute is defense against thermal energy, like blaster bolts and lightsabers. Bes'kar clearly has a much higher melting point and requires special forges and techniques which are jealously guarded by Mandalorian armorsmiths. We have to assume that even with all that magical nonsense, that the Lord of the Rings world is a lot more antiquated and behind the Mandalorian universe. And therefore, the types of forges your Dwarven miners are using cannot compete against a more modern Mandalorian forge. Plus, chainmail has holes in it, so it's not really good against energy weapons. I'm sure the plasma would filter through and burn your body.
Well, you might be right about the melting points, but we don't actually have a way to prove that. So I will settle for this. Mithril offers superior protection against projectile weapons and melee weapons, especially when you take into account how thin mithril mail is. A high-quality mithril chainmail has the elasticity and feel of linen, and it's no thinner than a regular tunic. But its individual interwoven rings are also as hard as steel. At the same time, it has greater kinetic energy absorption, which when scaled up to the level of thickness of plate armor could actually offer superior protection against shockwaves than Bes'kar, mainly due to the elasticity of the material. Whereas Bes'kar is better suited for protection against energy weapons you might see in the Star Wars galaxy.
Now that I think about it, I wouldn't be against wearing some mithril chainmail underneath my Bes'kar armor. I would say that's a good compromise.
Or better yet, imagine a mithril Bes'kar alloy, the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I guess that would work, but let me know in the comment section below what you think. Am I right? Is Bes'kar better? Or is American Ben right? Is mithril the better suit of armor to have? Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.